We are Rogue Media Sports.
The Doomsday Podcast would like to thank Marable Homes for being our presenting sponsor, and also Lakeside Roofing, two of the great companies in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Marable Homes and Lakeside Roofing. It is the Doomsday Podcast. Ed Werder standing by. Matt Mosley, Frito Nation Productions. We are at our studio in far north Dallas, and Ed has been on assignment for ESPN in Colorado, and Ed loves getting to see that unbelievable Denver offense. I love it. Here's the thing: if you're bad enough for most of the game, when you get that one great drive, it's like, oh, there's the guy we remember. So I thought that was kind of funny. And Denver finds a way.
Are you comparing the Russell Wilson era to the Tim Tebow era? Is that what I'm hearing? I mean, he scored 16, 16, and 11 points.
And they won, though. They're 2-1.
That's what they used to do under Tebow. One drive at the end of the game to win the whole thing.
They're doing just fine. I don't know why everybody's on them, but they're doing okay. And then they've got Judy says funny things after games, so I'm okay with them. Now, Ed, tonight, though, we were dialed in to Cowboys-Giants, and Cowboys come in 1-1. Giants, to the shock of all of us, are 2-0. Eagles improved to 3-0 yesterday. This becomes an enormous game for the Cowboys in the sense that you fall to 1-2 and let the Giants and Eagles go to 3-0, you got trouble with a capital T. And they find a way to get it done in a game where a lot of things were going against them, including, one horrific non-call in the end zone. Ed, this is another big early season win when you think of everything that's going on in the NFC East.
Well, the Cowboys were successful, a 12-win team under Mike McCarthy last year because they were 6-0 in the division. They were the only team in the NFL to win all their division games. And, to kind of add to the context that you laid out, there were only 3 undefeated teams in the NFL when today began, and 2 of them were in the NFC East. The Giants at 2-0 and the Eagles at 3-0. And the Eagles, arguably the most impressive team in the early going, and Jalen Hurts playing like a potential MVP candidate. So, yeah, I mean, the Cowboys were in a position where they really did need to win this game. And, they didn't have Dak Prescott among 4 starting offensive players who wound up missing the game, including unexpectedly Michael Gallup scratched sort of at the last minute. He had been through 2 weeks of padded practices, and everybody's expectation was that he was going to play in this game against the Giants, and we were going to begin to see maybe some more explosive plays in the passing game that had been lacking. Instead, he misses the game. Dalton Schultz, the tight end, misses the game. Connor McGovern misses the game. And so it was something, of a crisis again. And they were in a position where they really needed to figure out a way to win on the road. And you got your backup quarterback, Cooper Rush, making his first consecutive start. He started one-offs before, but never 2 consecutive games. And he was doing it with, his left side of his offensive line playing on the road for the first time in their careers, Matt Farniok and Tyler Smith. So yeah, they were presented with some real adversity in this game, even before they fell behind in the fourth quarter for the first time. But the Cowboys have now won 7 consecutive games against the NFC East. It's the longest active winning streak against the division in the entire NFL. And they get to try to extend it next week against Carson Wentz and the Commanders.
All right, always good when the Commanders come rolling into town and the Cowboys have to feel really good about things. Frito, please play the music, sir. It is the Doomsday Podcast, and always love getting together after these games, and people were on Twitter as we tape this late into Monday evening. People are out there excited. They're on Twitter. Hey, when's it drop? When does it drop, guys? Well, we gotta actually tape it before we can drop it. And that's what we're trying to do right now. And Ed, let's start with I mean, tremendous pass rush and another solid performance by Cooper Rush. And 21 of 31, 215 yards, and a touchdown. And even when he wasn't getting help in the first half, and I'll say, boy, Tolbert drops one on him. Tolbert gets his first start, or first, time he's active for the Cowboys, their third-round pick. CeeDee Lamb, who first game of the season did not play well, and he was very admitted that, and boy, everybody got on him. Michael Irvin, Drew Pearson came on my radio program and said that. Mike McCarthy jumped on him. And there he was tonight, racing across the middle, just flat out dropping what would have been a first down. It would have had the Cowboys in position to go down there and score. And yet the Cowboys overcame all that. And so, Ed, we'll have time to talk about the defensive performance. But from an offensive standpoint, you've already said it, left side rookie making his first road start. Left guard, inexperienced. This was a...
Two rookie tight ends.
Yeah.
Two rookie tight ends, one of them an undrafted player. And there was obvious from their performance that there were penalties on all those guys. Every one of those guys drew a penalty flag at some point in the game, as did Sam Williams, the rookie defensive end who was playing because, DeMarcus Lawrence was off the field for a little bit. And we are going to talk more about the defensive rush, but let's talk about Cooper Rush and his performance in this game because incredibly noteworthy performance. I mean, he's the second undrafted Cowboys quarterback to win each of his first three starts, joining the guy who brought him into the league, Jason Garrett, who was the head coach at the time Cooper Rush was signed by the Cowboys. And that's no small accomplishment when you consider, that Tony Romo was an undrafted player. He didn't win his first three starts. The fact that the Giants claimed Rush off waivers from the Cowboys in 2020 when Jason Garrett was their offensive coordinator. They signed him, then cut him twice. He's out of the league for a month before Dallas re-signs him after Dak Prescott suffers that season-ending injury in 2020 against the Giants. And here's Rush now 3-0 in his career as the Dallas starter. And, he was at his very best when the game was being decided, which we've seen from him before. The Giants scored their first touchdown on that Saquon Barkley run, took their only lead of the game, and Rush immediately responded with consecutive touchdown drives, Ezekiel Elliott rushing for a touchdown, and then, the 4 completions to CeeDee Lamb, including the one-handed play in the end zone for the touchdown. Dallas never trailed again. And on those 2 possessions, those successive touchdown possessions, Cooper Rush was 12 of 13 for 129 yards and a touchdown. He was great against the blitz, showed great poise, completed 7 of his last 8 passes against the blitz, including that go-ahead touchdown pass to CeeDee Lamb. So, and maybe, the big controversy of the week when I was even out there during the week was, Jerry Jones saying he hoped that Cooper Rush would play so well and the Cowboys would win so many games while Dak Prescott was out with this thumb surgery on his passing hand that the team would have a difficult decision to make between Rush and a healthy Dak Prescott when the moment emerged. And they began comparing it to 2016 when Dak Prescott replaced Tony Romo and Romo never got the position back because Dak led the Cowboys to 11 consecutive wins, a franchise record. And maybe, Matt, maybe this is what Jerry was thinking. Cooper Rush is the first undrafted quarterback to win each of his first 3 NFL starts and throw for 750 yards or more in those starts since Kurt Warner in 1999 with the Rams. Warner went on to win NFL MVP and Super Bowl MVP that season. Maybe that's Jerry's logic. The historic precedent of Kurt Warner.
Yeah, I like it, Ed, and I think as we speak, Dak is penning his concession speech, much like Tony had to do back in 2016. He said it's a meritocracy, and Dak replaced him. The truth is, Ed, we both know how even by Jerry standards, this was a bizarre statement by him because no one loves Dak more than Jerry. And no one understands the dynamics of all this, and it's not really a fair comparison to even Romo, because Romo was a lot closer to the end of his career than Dak is, and obviously where Dak is in his contract right now, making $40 million a year, and Jerry said that. Now, Jerry loves stirring things up, but Ed, this was really strange, and it put McCarthy in a situation where McCarthy had to kind of, shoot down Jerry. Zeke shot down Jerry in kind of a whimsical, funny way. But I would say, Jerry, you and I have been covering him a long time. You longer than I have. And but even by his standards, this was pretty out there by Jerry and pretty kind of shocking, some of the things he said.
Well, two interesting things about the comments to me, and you're right, Ezekiel Elliott did clickbait, and then somebody said it was the owner who said that, and he says, yeah, I know. It's all marketing. It's all marketing. And so that was a perfect take on the whole thing. But what's interesting to me is, first of all, that the comparisons to the 2016 situation come immediately after Tony Romo, the victim in 2016, lost his job to an injury and to Dak Prescott's outstanding play as his replacement. Tony Romo was around the Cowboys last week. He did the Cowboys game for CBS as the color commentator. And all of a sudden, Jerry, 3 or 4 days later, is revisiting 2016 and talking about, well, maybe we'll do again what we did, what we did to Romo. Maybe we'll do that to Dak. And the other thing that I think has to be considered here, before we just dismiss it as, insanely outrageous and not a worthy topic of serious conversation, is that this is the second time that Dak could interpret something Jerry has said about him as being, offensive. Because remember, when in 2016, when Dak won those 11 games in a row. The Cowboys won 11 Dak starts in a row, franchise record, finished 13-3. Even then, Jerry, the last holdout for Romo getting the job back, Jerry was publicly talking about this fantasy of, wouldn't it be a fairy tale story if somehow Tony got back in and led us to the Super Bowl? This is the second time that he's been somewhat disrespectful to Dak Prescott, I think. Now, I'd be curious to know what Dak honestly thinks of the whole thing. Apparently, McCarthy had a conversation with him about it. Jerry kind of blew it off like, well, if I see him, I might talk to him about it, or he might talk to me about it. But, obviously it's an irritant to somebody like Dak Prescott, I would think, that he would be understandably offended if he were. I'm not going to speak for him because I don't know how he feels about it, but I'd like to know. Well,
even if you think about how they negotiated his contract, and he had the ultimate leverage by getting injured, and then he really had the
right. But again, that was sort of disrespectful because they couldn't agree to terms, and he was franchised twice. The only quarterback in Cowboys history to ever be franchise tagged, and he was franchise tagged twice.
And even when we had Troy Aikman on this podcast, he admitted that he would understand if Dak maybe took that as a slight. I remember Troy talking about that with us when we had him on the Doomsday podcast. And oh, by the way, in addition to Zeke handling that nicely, I thought Cooper Rush handled it nicely, because I think the way he said, I don't even entertain those thoughts. And he said that he and Dak had a good laugh about it. He and Dak have stayed extremely close through all this, and I don't care if he wins 2 or 3 straight more games. I don't think that's going to change. Cooper Rush knows the score here, to which I'm glad he's doing well. It's a fun story, but I do find it funny that even after his second win last week, somebody was out there, Cooper, does this tell you that you can be a starter in the league? It's like, okay, can we just let this guy get through being the stopgap quarterback before we decide if he's going to be a starter in the league? Now, I get it. As bad as some of the quarterback play is, like if you're watching Chicago or Houston or some of these different places, you're like, hey, Cooper Rush looks pretty good about now. I get that. Okay, Ed,
I do think a final thought on this.
Yeah.
I do think that since we've just discredited Jerry or criticized Jerry, and deservedly so, in my opinion, for the comments, ultimately it looks like they got the backup quarterback job right. Like Cooper Rush has done exactly what you would want your backup quarterback to do. He's delivered wins every time he's taken the field. He's been aggressive with he understands the offense. He doesn't make mistakes. Shows good judgment, great poise, clutch player, and can really function fully within the offensive system that he knows so well. I mean, he's aggressive throwing to the outside receivers, and mostly when Dak's healthy, whenever that is, and Dak didn't rule out the possibility that it would be Washington this week, but after the game mentioned the Rams in 2 weeks as being far more likely, and I would tend to agree that they move in that direction. But whenever it is, his team's still going to be relevant because Cooper Rush did his job and did it exceedingly well.
Okay, which makes me think of this theory right now. As you were talking, something came into my mind about all this. What about the fact that, let's give Kellen Moore some credit for how he called this game and how they're functioning with Cooper Rush as the quarterback, and what we think is a inferior group of wide receivers, or they're obviously challenged at that position. Tonight they were challenged at tight end as well. Ed, I got a little theory floating around here. Is Kellen Moore, an NFL backup, better at calling plays for an NFL backup?
I don't know, but that better not be the case when Dak gets back, or this team's going to do nothing again, as has been the case all too often.
Okay.
But you're right. Kellen Moore deserves a lot of credit.
Yeah.
He's taken a lot of criticism. At times people seem to overlook the fact that since he began calling plays 3 years ago, the Cowboys had the number one offense in the NFL 2 of those 3 years. And so, I would think that this demonstrates that they got the decisions right at quarterback, and they should improve as these young players are being forced to play in the offensive line and a tight end. Continue to make progress. I mean, what more could you say about the way first-round pick Tyler Smith has played under the difficult circumstances of spending the entire training camp and preseason, taking all of his snaps at left guard, and then right before the opener, he has to go replace, Tyron Smith at left tackle, position he hasn't been in since, spring. And he does that so well through 2 games that when Jason Peters, a 9-time Pro Bowler, is ready to play, I mean, this is a potential Hall of Fame offensive lineman like Tyron Smith is, that when Jason Peters is ready to play tonight, they don't move Tyler Smith, they move Jason Peters. He plays next to Tyron Smith at left guard. That decision is made as an acknowledgement of how well Tyler Smith has played as a rookie his first 3 weeks.
That's a very good point, and that was interesting to see him as left guard. And by the way, 3rd possession of the game, Pollard rips off a 46-yard run. Guess who sealed the block over there at left guard? I mean, that's not even the guy's the all-pro player, and some people say future Hall of Famer. He's over there playing left guard. Now, Ed, before we get to stretch plays with Glenn Stretch Smith, I do want to say, and I know you want to give a thanks to Marable Homes. I was driving around the neighborhood just the other day, and we're talking Preston Hollow, Lake Highlands, Highland Park, all these places in Dallas. Marable Homes has become just an unbelievable home builder. And it's luxury homes, but also the great thing about it is custom homes. And the reason people continue to use Blake Marable in Marable Homes is because they've just got staying power. And they, sometimes people build a house and they move on, and later on in life they use a different home builder. People use Marable Homes over and over because they do such an incredible job. And it's been mostly, Ed, word of mouth. But they decided, hey, Doomsday Podcast is the most successful Cowboys podcast out there by some measures, by my measures. And why don't we?
Your estimation.
Yeah, why don't we get involved with that? And so far so good. And I every time, Ed, now I see a new home going up in the Dallas area. That's Marable Homes. That's Marable. I think, well, these people must have been listening to the Doomsday podcast. I just go with it. So, Ed,
well, those communities you mentioned. Those are some high tone blue blood areas. I mean, they don't. The city doesn't just give building permits to anybody. I mean, I imagine they're pretty selective there, and so that's a statement of trust in Marable Homes.
Yeah. Well said, Ed. And then Lakeside Roofing as well, just an incredible job. And, we got storms hitting different parts of the country right now. If you need a new roof, Lakeside Roof Company, whoa, big time. And we appreciate, we really appreciate our partnership with those folks. Okay, Ed, it is time to hear from former Cowboys coach and scout. His name is Glenn Stretch Smith. It is now time for Stretch Plays. Stretch, big win for the Cowboys, trailing 13-6, seemingly in trouble with a backup quarterback on the road. They get it done. They respond after some really bad drops in the first half and get a win. Before we start kind of going position by position, how big do you think this win was for the Cowboys as they improved to 2-1 and improved to 3-0 all time when Cooper Rush is their starting quarterback?
I mean, think about what we said 2 weeks ago when I suspended the offense. I just threw them out of the school, and think about the fact of where they've come now. I mean, I know you want to start with a quarterback. I know everybody wants to start, and he did a great job of managing the game. I'm not taking that away from him. But I'm going to tell you something. The guy I've got to give credit to is Kellen Moore. I mean, he knows exactly what Cooper Rush's strengths are. And his strengths are to max protect, which leaves two tight ends in, 7 or 8 man protection, throw the ball in the middle of the field where he doesn't really have to drive the ball outside the numbers, give him some throws that he can make, and he executes those throws. So, I mean, first of all, not only have I let Kellen Moore back in the building, I mean, in 2 weeks, the damn guy's summa cum laude. I mean, he's back at the top of his class for what he's done, I believe, with this Cowboy offense. He ran the football. They did a nice job of bringing Noah Brown in motion and leading him up in there. I was kind of surprised on that last play because they were mad at the linebacker and the safety for coming downhill and attacking Noah Brown, thinking they were fixing to run that lead up in there. I got to give Kellen Moore a lot of credit. I'm just telling you. And all of a sudden, he went from game 1, it felt like he was interviewing to get a job in the NFL, to game 2 and 3, understanding, man, I've got to get this backup quarterback some throws that he can make. I got to run the ball. I got to use all of my personnel. I got to use tight ends. Hell, they weren't even on the roster week 1. I just thought his game plan, how they executed it, I mean, was really good. And you got to give Cooper Rush credit. They gave him the throws that he could make, and that's exactly what he did in the football game.
Well, you're right. I mean, Hendershot is in there and wasn't expected to make the team. He had a 30-yard catch tonight, and he made some plays, and you overcame some really bad drops. Jalen Tolbert, bad deep drop, and then of course in the first half, just a tremendous throw right in the hands of CeeDee Lamb. He didn't make it, but he makes up for it on that deciding drive. And Stretch, let's go to that. Let's go to the offense first. Jason Peters, the guy was a long-time All-Pro left tackle, he decides to retire, and the Cowboys bring him back at age 40 or 41 and say, hey, why don't you go in there and play some left guard? And on that first offensive possession that he's in the game, that's the third possession of the game, Pollard breaks off a 46-yard run. What did you make of, Tyler Smith at left tackle, Jason Peters playing some playing some left guard, the entire offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, when you look, Smith had a holding call. They've got to get that cleaned up. I mean, it's almost like I want to go in there and say, you know what, Mike McCarthy, why don't you put boxing gloves on these guys that get holding calls? You can't hold with a pair of boxing gloves on. It makes you get a hand. You need me to teach you how to coach? It teaches you how to keep hand position. I thought if you take those things away, this offensive line is starting to grow together. I mean, be honest, the end of the game right there. Hey, they weren't listening to any of that yapping. They were in there saying, hey, I tell you what, we just kicked your ass and right in your own backyard, and you better like it. To me, you kind of like those guys that get a little bit of that, starts with an S and ends with a T in their neck. I mean, you got to like that. And so I love what the offensive line did. I like Hendershot. Now, he comes with a questionable background, but I tell you what, it looks like he's got that same kind of that attitude. Did a great job blocking. Ferguson was in there, led up in there on the goal line play. And I think when you look at how this offense has gone from week 1 to now to week 3 with a backup quarterback, and say whatever you want, it's hard to win in the NFL. And to go out and win the way they didn't turn the football over, perfect, right? When the screen wasn't there, Russ just drilled it into the ground. I mean, if it wasn't there, throw it away, live to fight another day. And guess what, man? I mean, they're feeding off of one another now. They're playing complementary football. The offense knows we don't have to score every time. We got to put our defense in good position. And so when you think about that and you let it all come together for you. And when you talked about CeeDee Lamb, to me, Noah Brown is the MVP of the game. I mean, you saw what he did and how he was blocking on the perimeter. You saw CeeDee Lamb, they threw that little wide receiver screen. He got 1.5 yards. They threw it to Noah Brown. He got 9.5. Just ran the corner over. So to me, it's an infectious thing that's going on offensively. And after game 1 and Kellen Moore saying, I better hang on to the job I got instead of trying to interview for a head coaching job, they've done a hell of a job. All
right, and a good point. Noah Brown made some great catches early and has really been solid for them. And let's remember they got Michael Gallup likely coming back against the Commanders next week. Let's go to the quarterback and the running backs. Obviously, Pollard is your most explosive back, but let's stick with Cooper Rush. They put him in a good position. I like what you said. They're not trying to have him do things he's not capable of, but I kind of like the fact that instead of, it could have, when a quarterback has receivers not making plays for him, you can try to do too much, and it can snowball on you, and he didn't let it happen and continues to do a really nice job. What would you? How would you grade out the quarterback play?
I mean, when you look at how, and I like his demeanor. I mean, he's kind of just feels like and looks like he belongs in a situation that he's in. It's not too big for him. I thought he did a great job. I mean, I'm telling you, and I'm going to tell you this straightforward, other than the penalties, Matt, and other than the drop by CeeDee Lamb, I mean, this offensive line, B+, running backs, absolute B+, tight ends, B, quarterback A. You got to give him an A for functioning in a game that you didn't even expect him to function in.
All right, A for the quarterback. I like it. Let's go over to the defense. And, I mean, you had Donovan Wilson, safety, with a sack. You had like 24 pressures. Micah Parsons was ill all week, had some Pedialyte that he showed up with at the game, and then DeMarcus Lawrence, who had not had a lot of pressures this season, 3 sacks, very dominant game. They had the quarterback under duress. Dorrance Armstrong, solid game. What did you? Let's start with that pass rush. What did you think of the pass rushers in this game?
I mean, again, they're rolled like you said. Dorrance and he blocks the first field goal. I mean, you can tell he's becoming a really good complementary end Lawrence did a great job. And, hey, he took advantage of a guy that wasn't as good as him. Again, you're not going to style point that. But what I like is I like the guys that they're rolling through there. Odighi, Zura. I mean, you're seeing guys roll through the defensive line. To me, that's what gives you the ability to pressure with the four-man blitz or four-man rush. Because guess what? They're not tired. They're fresh all the time. You saw, and I think that's helping Lawrence some. Guess what else is helping him? The scheme. Sometimes they put him down inside where they can get him over a guard who's not as good and not as athletic as him. You see a defensive coordinator in Dan Quinn who moves his guys around. You mentioned Wilson. I'm going to mention Hooker. I mean, two safeties that they'll smack you. I mean, if you come through there, they're going to hit you. The one play that Dallas defense got hit on, it was because Anthony Barr didn't squeeze down on that zone look. But I'm going to tell you something. I like Anthony Barr. I like what he brings. I like that he brings some experience to that linebacker group. Defensive line-wise, Matt, I thought absolutely you can give the defensive line nothing but an A for the fact that they pressured the quarterback all night.
Okay, defensive line A. Linebackers, you mentioned Barr. Van Der Esch made some plays. And the safeties, as you said, sounds like you gave them pretty much a B-plus type grade. Trayvon Diggs, Anthony Brown, Jordan Lewis. There were some plays made against all of them, but Trayvon Diggs, game on the line, makes another interception, and, of course, it was a great one, getting the hand below the football. Now, he had some other opportunities, almost made the plays, but seems like Trayvon Diggs is kind of getting back to a little bit of what we remember from last season.
Yeah, and again, he's going to gamble with you some. He misses the pick right there on the comeback. Made a great break on the ball. He was just a tad late. That would have been a pick six. Made a heck of a pick on the ball where he saw the dig route and Sills slipped. He just broke underneath the football and made a heck of a catch. Lewis is a good he's a good nickel corner. Now they're going to get called some. Joseph got a hands to the face that time. You're going to get some of those. You're going to get some calls against those guys. Just the way the NFL is. But when you look at that group as a whole, I'm talking about the secondary as a whole. They are really playing well. They tackle extremely well. I mean, you don't see guys missing tackles out on the edge. They're throwing themselves around. And then, like I said, you got two safeties who will absolutely hammer you. I mean, you got to give those guys a B plus. And then, like you were saying, linebackers. I mean, I think Van Der Esch does a nice job in coverage. I think he's lost a half step. He's not as fast as he was. But I do like the addition of Barr, and I like I love what Dan Quinn does with the defense. And then you look at it overall. Now again, I'm looking at it overall. You look at the job that Kellen Moore did. You look at the job that Dan Quinn did. And then how about special teams? I mean, they get a big return. They block a field goal. I mean, Bones Fossil, you got to give him some credit too. And maybe, Matt, you could take a little money and buy him a couple more wristbands. He needs some sweatbands. It's a little warm out there.
Man loves a good sweatband. MetLife, it can get a little, you can get sultry there. And so he needs a little bit of that. As you said, a good return by Turpin. That was about 28 yards, and that was extremely helpful. And then the kick block, great penetration. The block is made, and the Cowboys special teams, a much maligned group, only like a year ago from Stretch, now being praised. And now Bones Fossil, one of Stretch's favorite men in the NFL. Stretch, I appreciate it, and I hope you appreciate the big time haircut that I got after being called for mopery and really accosted for quite some time. I think you'd have to admit this was a pretty aggressive haircut.
Well, I mean, you've said it twice, and you want to sit in there and pat yourself on the back for doing something you ought to do. You know what, Mosley, good for you for getting a haircut, on the podcast. Let's give everybody a knick-knack, paddywhack, give a dog a bone. Mosley got him a haircut. Good for you, Mosley. You don't look like a mutt anymore.
Oh, Frito loves it. Frito loves that. You should see him over here. Just a big old belly laugh. It is the Doomsday Podcast Stretch Plays with Glenn Stretch Smith. Thank you, Stretch, and we will talk to you next week after the Cowboys play the Commanders.
See you, buddy.
All right, there it is. And Ed, we're 2 weeks removed from him expelling the entire offense, the coaches and the players and everything, and now they've all been let back, and they're getting A's, and Kellen got an A, and the offensive line did. Cooper Rush, I think, got an A. So lots of positivity around this team right now. Now, Ed, let's look at the defense a little bit. Late in the game, the shocking stat goes up if you're watching Monday Night Football, and it's like 22 pressures. And I'm sure in the next blink, there were like probably two more. So it probably finished up somewhere in the 22 to 24.
It was 24.
24. Okay. 24 pressures in this game. In a game, Ed, where Micah Parsons had been sick and missed Wednesday's practice, Thursday's practice, I believe. I don't think he did much on Friday. I mean, he was not doing well, and he arrived at the game with a big bottle of Pedialyte. We had pictures of that, and Ed, still, the pass rush was extremely effective, and Daniel Jones was under duress the whole evening. Giants scored one touchdown. Stop me if you've heard this one before. Cowboys defense continues to hold up very, very well, and I don't think we can just attribute that to, they just seen bad offenses, because obviously who have they played? Bucks, Bengals, and Giants. I think two of those three good offenses. Giants, remains to be seen.
Well, the Giants came into the game having allowed the most pressure on their quarterback through two games in the NFL. And, let's not forget what this game meant on a personal basis to Dan Quinn in his second year as a Cowboys defensive coordinator. One of the jobs that he interviewed for during the offseason was the Giants head coaching job. And he was the fourth person to interview for the job. It went to Brian Dable, the Bills offensive coordinator, and you saw tonight his fine work. But, Dan Quinn grew up in Morristown, New Jersey. He had, Lawrence Taylor posters on his bedroom wall when he was a kid. And so I think this meant a little something to him. Let me show you what I got. And when you're playing your backup quarterback, you need your defense to win the game for you. And they certainly did. I mean, through three games, the Cowboys have only allowed 3 touchdowns. The Giants ran no offensive plays in the red zone. And while their pass protection's been bad and Daniel Jones has been prone to turning the ball over and getting sacked, they do have a first-round pick at left tackle in Andrew Thomas and a first-round pick at right tackle in Evan Neal. And yet still, Dan Quinn's defense sacked Daniel Jones 6 times, intercepted him once, and he was pressured a career high 24 times in the game. That's the most by any quarterback in any game this season. Second most over the last 2 years. The most a Giants quarterback has been pressured since ESPN began tracking pressures in 2009, and it's tied for the most pressures generated by the Cowboys defense in that same time frame. Daniel Jones has now been pressured 49 times this season. That's the most in the NFL. So pretty remarkable, and it wasn't just Micah Parsons, who led the NFL in sacks coming in and had the most pressures. 8 different Cowboys defensive players pressured Jones multiple times. That's tied for the most players with multiple pressures in any game yet this season. Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence and Dorrance Armstrong each had 4 pressures. Lawrence obviously had 3 sacks, tying his career high. So now let's step back and put this into perspective through 3 games, shall we? The Cowboys defense under Dan Quinn leads the NFL in sacks and total pressures. Their next opponent is Washington and quarterback Carson Wentz, who was sacked a career high 9 times by the Eagles yesterday. Only the 49ers have generated pressure at a higher rate than the Cowboys. So they're first in sacks, they're first in pressures, and they're second in pressure percentage. Nearly half the time the opposing quarterback drops back to pass, the Cowboys create pressure. That doesn't even, and pressure doesn't always result in a sack. Sometimes it results in an incompletion. Sometimes the quarterback completes the ball anyway, but that's an enormous amount of pressure for any quarterback to have to handle in a 60-minute football game.
Yeah, and this quarterback, Daniel Jones, has had his moments, but the Giants have not shown that they're in love with him. And in fact, this is likely his final year there. He has some ability. He can move, but boy, he gets sacked a lot. And Ed, I think it's finally time to make quarterback pressures part of the stats in fantasy football. All right, especially since I have the Cowboys defense. I would like the pressures to count as some form of points. But that's a good amount of sacks. And the fact that DeMarcus Lawrence, and then I probably saw this on your Twitter timeline. I mean, my gosh, the stuff you just ran off there was fabulous. But Lawrence came into this game on like 45 pass rushing attempts with no pressures.
No pressures.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then to have 3 sacks and totally dominate his man. And I thought that was really big. And then Dorrance Armstrong block kick, pressures. Donovan Wilson comes in from the safety spot. Malik Hooker played really well. They've been playing without Jaron Kurz. I thought the corners, for the most part, as we said earlier, Trayvon Diggs misses what could have been a pick six, but then the game-clinching interception he makes. And while last year he had 11 interceptions, this one was, on review, he got his hand under it, and it was an incredible interception, and it closed out the game against the Giants. And it was, this is one of the, this is a guy, if you think about it, during training camp, shut down his social media because they kept posting pictures of him getting burned. And while they praise him, what's the other part they always do? Ed, and we do it too. They put up the graphic. Okay, he had 11 picks, but he gave up 785 passing yards. And that's most in the NFL, and the interceptions are most in the NFL. But I thought tonight the secondary played extremely well.
Well, two things that come to mind in this conversation for me are, regarding DeMarcus Lawrence and the game he had. When we were out there this week and he was available, we were talking to him, and he was, sort of mocking Daniel Jones by calling him Little Eli, saying he had sacked the real Little Eli 4 times in his career, and he had had pretty good success against the other Little Eli, Daniel Jones, and obviously he did again today. Now I think he sacked Daniel Jones now more times than anybody except Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is the only opposing quarterback he sacked more often than he sacked Daniel Jones. And at one point, he was kind of going through how the Giants looked under Brian Daboll with the new offense and the personnel. And at one point it was like, well, what do you think of their offensive line? And he looks and smiles and says, I think we'll be all right. So he knew this was a mismatch in the making, and that the Cowboys in all likelihood were going to dominate up front, and they were going to create a lot of pressure and big plays on Daniel Jones, and they did. And then the other thing, as we sort of close out this discussion about, Dan Quinn, which is how this all started about defense, was remember when we talked to him at training camp and we asked him, why are you still here? You interviewed for 6 head coaching jobs. Why are you still here? And one of the reasons he gave, other than I'm not in a big rush. I love it here. I like being a part of this. This has given me joy again in coaching. The other thing he said, if you remember, and I'm sure you do, he said, this defense is going to be good. And I knew it was going to be good. And I didn't want somebody else coaching my defense. And so there you have it.
Yeah, I think that's good. And some of the guys we haven't even mentioned, like Odigizua and Gallimore. These are really good defensive linemen. It's an excellent rotation, and they seem to be as deep as they've been in a long time. So it's a strong defense, and the quarterback is functioning very well. and the Cowboys are somehow 2-1, and after it looked like a complete disaster after week 1. And we wondered, I mean, we knew Doomsday podcast numbers would always be strong, but we didn't know that they would just mushroom like they have, and we're so appreciative of that. Ed, have a tremendous evening. Safe travels as you travel around the country and come back to us in the Metroplex, and appreciate everything you've done this evening. We appreciate Mark Friedman of Frito Nation Productions, everything that we do here. And for Ed Werder, Mark Frito Friedman, I am Matt Mosley. Good night from far North Dallas.